All right, welcome back. Last time we totally got the hang of loops. Today, we're diving into another super important concept, how Python groups a bunch of data together. We're going to look at two incredibly powerful tools, lists and tuples. Honestly, these are fundamental to pretty much everything you're going to do in Python.
So let's kick things off with a real-world problem. Picture this, you're a teacher, you've got 50 students, and you need to keep track of all their test scores. How would you even begin to handle that in your code? Let's think about the different ways we could tackle this. Well, one way, I guess you could call it the old way, would be to make a new variable for every single student. You can see it on the left, M1, M2, M3. Can you imagine doing that 50 times? It would be an absolute mess and a nightmare to manage. But then, look at the right. That's the Python way. So much better, right? Just one single variable that holds all the scores together in a nice, neat collection. It's just cleaner, way more efficient, and so much easier to work with.
Yeah, so clearly we need a better tool for this job. And the first tool we're going to grab from our Python toolbox is the list. You should think of this as your go-to for creating collections of items that you might need to change around later.
So what is a list exactly? Well, think of it like a container, maybe like a box. The things you put inside have a specific order, and that order stays put. But the key thing here is that it's changeable, or to use the proper programming term, it's mutable. Oh, and as a cool bonus, you can mix and match data types inside it. No problem.
And making one couldn't be simpler. You just use these square brackets and separate whatever you want to put inside with commas. And just like that, you've got a list called marks, holding 4 different scores. It's so simple and easy to read.
Okay, so once you have your list, how do you get something out of it? You use its index, which is just its position in the line. Now, this is a super important concept in Python, so really let this sink in. The counting starts at 0, not 1. So as you can see here, if we ask for marks at index 0, we get the very first item in the list, which is 80.
And this right here, this is the real superpower of lists. They are mutable, which just means you can change them. See how we can just target the item at index 1 and swap it out for a completely new value? This is what makes lists so incredibly useful for any kind of data that you know is going to need updating.
All right, so now let's meet the list's close cousin, the tuple. It looks a lot like a list and it acts a lot like a list, but it has one really big and actually very handy twist.
So a tuple is also a container that keeps things in order. But here's the huge difference. It is immutable, and that's just the programmer's way of saying you can't change it. Once you create a tuple, it is locked in, totally set in stone. Now, this isn't just about being safe. It actually makes tuples a little bit faster and more efficient with your computer's memory, which can be a really big deal in larger programs.
The way you create them is a subtle clue to what they are. Instead of the square brackets you use for a list, you use regular parentheses. So, right here, we've created a tuple of colors.
And this slide just perfectly shows off that core feature of tuples. If you dare to try and change one of the items inside, Python will stop you dead in your tracks and give you an error. But you know, this isn't a bug, it's actually a feature, a built-in guardrail that makes sure your data stays exactly the way you intended it to.
Okay, so you might be thinking, why on earth would I want something that I can't change? It sounds kind of restrictive, right? But believe me, this unchangeable feature is incredibly useful. So let's figure out how you decide when to reach for a list and when to grab a tuple.
This little table here really boils it all down. Lists use square brackets, and they're mutable, meaning they can change, so they're perfect for any kind of dynamic data. Tuples, on the other hand, use parentheses. They're immutable, no changes allowed, making them the ideal choice for any data that needs to stay fixed.
Let's think of a real-world scenario. A shopping cart. It's the perfect example for a list, isn't it? You're always adding things, you might take something out, you might change how many you want. The data is constantly changing by its very nature. You absolutely need the flexibility that a list gives you.
But what about something like the days of the week? Well, there are 7 of them, they're in a specific order, and that order should never change. I mean, you definitely don't want a random bug in your code to accidentally change Monday into Fun Day, right? Using a tuple guarantees that this kind of data stays safe and sound.
So as you start using these, here are a few common tripwires to watch out for.
First, and I can't say this enough, always remember that counting starts at 0. Second, don't fight the tuple. Don't try to change it. That's its whole point. And finally, really think about whether your data should be changeable. If keeping it constant is important, use a tuple to protect it.
So here's the real takeaway. You just have to look at your data and ask one simple question. Is this going to change? If the answer is yes, if it's dynamic, like a to-do list, then you want a list. But if it's a fixed, constant thing that should never be messed with, like the coordinates for a specific spot on a map, that's a job for a tuple. Making that choice is the first step to writing code that's more robust and predictable. So think about it. What are some other real-world examples you can come up with?